Hey,
Hey, how are you?
oh, I'm there. I exist. Drinking tea. How are you?
Good.
I saw you sent something to Raidul.
Yes, that output that I mentioned in our meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I haven't looked at it yet. Hey,
Yeah. Hello everyone. Hello Tammy. How are you doing?
hello. Ah, uh, okay.
Do,
As well as can be expected.
do you have any breathing problem or shortness of breath?
Not really. No,
Okay.
I have my nose is stuffy.
Mm,
It's mostly just being weak and like
yeah.
not having energy,
Yes.
main problem. So yeah, I don't have the worst symptoms.
Mm. Hello Zara.
Good, and you?
Hey, Adam. I don't know how many we'll get today.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, Kartik.
Hey Tammy, how you feeling?
Eh, I'm
Yeah.
sitting up, so that's progress. Let's see how long I can keep it up.
Is this your first time with COVID?
It is. I thought I was immune, right? But nope, I'm really not.
I think I'm up to two or three. So
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I know a lot of people have gone through it a lot of times. Cool. We will be here to help with notes. So I thought, I didn't send out the meeting notice because I wanted to do this, and then I was like, I have to make plans. And I was not in a state to make plans. But then I thought we were doing really well, just with the brainstorming or coming up with little ideas. Hey, Stacy. Hello, Allison. And so I thought we could just maybe come up with ideas for um I really like the idea of conversations around particular topics. And I also really like the idea of conversations between people who aren't working so closely together. Um, and so I don't want to like overstretch it and do something that doesn't work or feels fake. But I thought maybe we could have a few ideas about what the conversations could be about and how they could be used to bring forward things that people have done. So I feel like that was something that was raised when we were talking about the video. And then uh we didn't really get to pursue it. And then I put it on the agenda for the in-person meeting, and then it just got it we were doing other things. Um so maybe any thoughts? Like, I would like to have I think a conversation about X with person Y would be really cool. And
Okay,
and
I
these,
have the,
yeah, go for it. These are going
but
to
I
be
don't
really
have any
fun.
with me. Sorry, it's also no kids are at school today. Maybe Adam already said that. So we have
No,
some
he didn't.
background noise. Okay.
Oh, good. Yeah. Lovely
Yeah.
days, those days.
Yeah. Um, n- I am not trying to not be in a conversation, but I think it would be really neat to have Stacy talk with Ryan about his paper because of the role of intermediaries. And so she could interview him about that paper. I think it'd be neat to have Rachel interview or talk with Chris about his work, since the idea is that these like the semi-structured interview content is rarely used to like inform something like an ABM. I think that could be an interesting conversation. I have thought that maybe Zara could interview me about our paper, even though we work on it together. I think that might be an interesting, like, maybe not. I don't want to say something with me would be interesting, but it might be interesting to hear your questions, Zara. So that's why I thought of that. So those are 3 pairs. I didn't mean to leave people out, but I thought it would maybe just jumpstart the conversation. I read your email just briefly before we joined, Tammy, but
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just to add to what Ellison said, I think it'll be cool to talk to Ellison and Zara. I think like because your understanding of concepts and representations of well-being with what I'm finding in the data set, I think that'd be a interesting pairing as well. So
yeah, I love that idea, Karthik.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. It'd be hard to structure or limit, I think, right? Because I'm thinking these little conversations are like a minute each. We won't have time for much more. I'll also add not to exclude or double down on anybody, but I heard Kartik and Raidul having an interesting conversation at the in-person meeting. I think about ABMs, like why are you doing that? Or I don't recall what, and I wasn't eavesdropping. So I don't, I didn't get the whole idea of your conversation. Anyone else? Is there somebody that you would like to I'm trying to think of, is the right word interview or probe? Because we want to make it sound like we've like actually done something, and that we also want it to be like it's not the first time we're hearing about it, right? Which it's not. So it'll be hard to kind of titrate that exactly right um inquiry and comparison.
For me, at least, a lot of what Chris has found in his interviews is, I mean, it's not really at odds. It's probably, I guess, complementary in some ways to what a lot of what we know about decision making from the social sciences, which tends to emphasize um, like characteristics of the individual and these maybe like social psychological sorts of factors like social norms and values and whatnot. But there's clearly a lot of context and contextual issues, things that kind of happen in the home and happen with interactions with contractors and local government, et cetera, that's lost. And I think a lot of the more kind of quantitative survey-based literature that I think he's bringing out. So I think it'd be interesting to they're not, I don't think they're competing explanations like the contextual things versus the more social psychological things. But they're thinking about how you could marry those two in some really rigorous research to me is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have thoughts on this, Chris?
Yeah, well, I don't, I don't necessarily have any preferences in terms of or additional thoughts on who to pair up with, but I do like the idea of pairing up with Raidul and talking about him asking me a few questions uh, about the interviews themselves and how they connect with some of his work.
Stacy, is there somebody you'd like to interview or who you think should talk to you?
I haven't really given it much thought. I wasn't really seeing myself as part of this process until today. I thought that the direction was going to be like kind of the individual PIs giving report backs on work products and things. but I really like the direction of this because after watching some of one of the sample videos that was sent out, having people talk at like their natural pace at 1.5 speed was just like too overwhelming. So I think that having conversations instead of just trying to pack as many words as possible into 30 minutes makes sense. So I liked Allison's idea of having me interview Ryan. I could also see interviewing Chris on lessons learned from the surveys. Interviewing me, I don't want to be interviewed.
I actually think I might be the person to do that. And a part of it could be like essentially like the people Stacy's tried to get involved are intermediaries. So I think that makes sense of like a understanding of what these folks are doing from different perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've been really dancing around how to bring in Stacy's work, right? Because I think there was a lot of things that we wanted to do that didn't happen. And to me it was, well, maybe we should have pushed harder, but I think it was the things that did not happen, it was authentic that they didn't happen. We didn't say, well, let's have a consultation anyway, right? And so and then I think our latest work on, or what we identified about things that or groups that we want to bring in, comes more into alignment. But then I don't think this is what they want to see, right? They want to see like, oh, you have an engagement and it works really well. And instead I'm like, wow, you don't talk to the same people that you want to hear from, which is not a surprise anymore, but it just, for me, calls into question this whole notion of what community engagement means, where you're supposed to be learning and giving this to the same people. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but I do think it's an evolution. I just don't know how to present it.
This isn't entirely related, but it's connected. I do think the meeting that we had that Stacy arranged, there were a few questions from the that were generated from that discussion that made their way to the script. Particularly issues related to trust and what information people trust, how they go about extending that trust, what avenues they seek out. And I've found that in the interviews themselves, that's led to some rather interesting discussions. And so, or data. So I think that there might be a place for us to talk about that, because I see it as a little bit of convergence, not necessarily in the way we've been focusing on, but I do see some there.
Kartik, you and Narasimha have been responsible for a pretty huge collection of data. And I've thought it would be interesting to have somebody who's not a data person inquire why you've done this. And so I think not all of these interactions need to be conversations, but I think we can use them to showcase the importance of what somebody is doing for another, for the value for another part of the project. So is there anyone that you could see inquiring of you?
Well, I know Stacy didn't want to be interviewed or being put in this position, but yeah, I think talking to Stacy would be a good conversation, because we're like, hey, this is this, data set, it's like so many features, but how can the community use this data set? Or how can local leaders use this data? So that could be an interesting direction where once we put this out, how can people get in there, play around with it? What are the options? What can they get out of it? So that could be an interesting direction where it's not particularly about the analysis we're doing, but it's more about just the data being out there. So
And then what are let's see, what are the things that haven't been brought out yet? And I don't think that they all need to be conversations. I think we can just use those to spice it up. But, so we haven't really talked about the system mapping, which we haven't got very far with. So I don't know if we want that to be a conversation, but, Adam, is that something you could see being a conversation, or?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Like, what would that look like?
Hold on a second. Sorry. My kids are yelling at me.
Okay,
Sorry, they picked up.
okay. And Zara, what about your work
We'll
with
circle back.
oh, yeah, okay. I'll come back to you. Zara, what about the Restock work?
That's a good idea. We can talk about what we get from RESTAG, because it's a comprehensive work and it provides a lot of information on the heterogeneity in housing characteristics and how it impacts the energy demands in the houses. One of the things that may be useful as a factor in the decision making later.
Okay, so a couple things in the chat. Let's start with Ryan. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a better understanding of how to go about system mapping now. Like, I think it was one of those ideas when we wrote this proposal, we said we're going to do this and had really no idea what it was going to mean. And so I think what we could talk about is how what we've learned from Chris's interviews and Kartik's work and things like that are actually going to support like the questions we're going to ask in this. In addition to like, yeah, we have trialed the method. We learned, you all did that workshop to learn what was going to work and maybe what wasn't going to work and what was going to take extra effort. But I think if we justify, here's why we've waited on this, it's good to bring up because that sets the stage for what we're going to do next as well.
Mm-hmm. Adam, do you have anything to say if your kids stopped creating distractions?
Yeah, you were asking about the Fort Collins data?
No, I don't think I was asking
Oh,
about.
sorry. My wires may have crossed with the
That was me in the
conversations.
chat I was on the private line, Adam.
Okay, sorry.
You relaying
Oh.
sub conversations.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry,
Sorry, my wires got crossed.
not
Yeah,
privy.
sorry, Tammy. I know we have limited time, but do you mind repeating your question?
Can I remember it? My brain cells are not very functional right now.
Well, you have a better excuse than me.
I remember it, so I can help.
You
That's
could
helpful.
go for it.
So I had said that I think we should talk about system mapping in terms of like, here's what we've learned from the existing research about what we're going to do with system mapping because we're not very far along with it. But I think that's an argument we can make of like, based on Chris's work, based on Kartik's work, based on Christina's work, we have a better idea of what questions to ask. And maybe that's how we go about that conversation, is framing it in terms of, here's how this is going to build on what we've done.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to frame it because I suspect that we won't have a lot. I don't know how much we're going to actually have done before we have to write this report.
No, we're not going to have anything done.
Okay, so
It's
I think,
due
I
in
mean, I
like
think that it's fair to say that it's a really diverse and varied area, lots of kind of parallel thinking and similar concepts that are slightly different. And we've navigated this diverse, I mean, this literature spread like all over the place. Some of the review materials that I've found um have, have covered like 30 different methods that are kind of all really similar, but there's little tweaks and sometimes they're called different things in different disciplines. There's uh I just the other day, a couple weeks back, I found a review piece that was basically ways to kind of quantify networks and calculate things like centrality and whatnot. But there's even like all these conflicting or related measures that are just slightly different depending upon which you choose. So it's a really it's different than like it's like stats 101 where you learn like how to calculate Pearson correlations and OLS. Like there's like this clear, this is what you're supposed to do sort of thing. So I think we can frame it in a way that we had to navigate through this very complex, um, very kind of siloed, diverse literature, and we didn't want to rush into doing something that maybe was not ideal, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
And we want that to be in conversation with other pieces that we're producing as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'll think about that. I don't want to divert too much, but this is something that I've also wondered what to do with. Like there's been a fair bit in our group of review on Adam's part for the PSM, on Allison's part for the residential well-being, Narsima and Raidul for the heat pump adoption literature. We put a lot of time into that, and I feel like that's necessary, but in other people's work, I did not see that being primary, and I feel like I'm not ashamed of it. I feel like you have to do that, or you're just like inventing your own field and then hoping everybody else will catch up. But it's another thing that I'm contemplating, like how do we present that as being necessary to move the field forward, to consider what other people do? Because I feel like we could look a lot farther if ahead if we had just like, we're gonna do our own thing, right? And like we have all these models. Um and and I don't think that's what we should have done. So I don't know how to present the value of incorporating what is known in the field. But it's a thing that is in my head. So Kartik has a question in the chat. Is it going to be conversations and slides of results to provide context, or mostly conversations? I think we have to show results. I'm thinking that some of those are going to be just people presenting what they found. And some of them are going to be conversations and so it'll be a mix to make it a little more interesting and demonstrate that we are working together. That is my thought. I haven't started to lay this out yet. my ideal of what it is we develop a slide deck, or and I have like a draft slide deck, like here's where Kartik says this, and here's a conversation, and then people can comment on, first of all, the major structure, right? Like I would really rather present this as something else.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly that, Tammy. Okay, yeah.
But if there's a way that you already feel like it would be effective to present something, then feel free to share that with me, because I'm going to have to be doing this like really shortly.
Yeah, I think a lot of it would also depend on who the partner is, I guess, because I would imagine, yeah, I want to modify the slides based on who I'm talking with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm thinking, well, that's probably too much detail. Yeah, I was hoping to be much farther along on both drafting the report and beginning the slide deck, and I am not. But I have spent a good bit of time dreaming about it. If I'm not sure that helps. So is there anything that we have? Let's see, I'm trying to cover all the basis of the things we're doing. Yeah. Yeah, and I think just I'm assuming everyone can read Adam's comment, so I don't have to reread it. I feel like one of the things I've tried to think about is how do we converge with everybody else in the who's working in the field, right? When we came into this, we recognized that Department of Energy is working in the housing space, and they're doing they put together the whole res stock, for example. Well, it would be silly to redo that. And if we did, we would create something that not only that was a duplication of effort, but that they wouldn't be able to buy into. And I think the same with what Narsima is doing with NEMS, right? There's a national modeling system. We might be critical of it, but it's unlikely that however beautiful ReadyDual's ABM turns out, that NEMS is suddenly going to adopt it. Right? And so there have to be bridges. And likewise with the PSM, I feel like I don't know, maybe you could be born, or it could be part of your thing to know how to do fuzzy cognitive mapping in the energy space, but I don't feel like that's a slam dunk. So one thing that I also have to deal with, you're supposed to say how you addressed the review comments on your proposal. So I finally went back and looked at them, and I had looked at them at the very beginning. But I didn't look at the panel summary, I think. I just read all the reviewers' comments. And one of them was like complaining about how we were doing well-being. Like, it's not that simple. But what I didn't read in the panel summary was they were like, you should add a well-being researcher. And so I read that, I'm like, oh shit, and now this may sound apologetic, but I'm not sure we could have done that. Right? I'm not sure we could have found somebody with the who is an expert in well-being and also wanted to do what we're doing. And I think one of the things that I found to be useful and like brings me gratitude about this group is how I think we all have a very different skills, but a very common purpose. And yeah, I know exactly, Allison, because I have tried to do this, like at a social scientist, right? And it doesn't work unless you have somebody who's aligned with you. So I'm gonna have to make a case in retrospect for why we didn't do that, but I do believe that we have done a lot of yes, we have done we have addressed that comment in a different way. That I think Kartik, with your work on fusing the Gallup data together, and Ellison with your kind of hindcast look into what people do, and then trying to bring these together into an operational framework for how to do well-being. I think we are addressing that, but it is a case we're going to have to make strongly because it was the one review comment that was really strong. Yeah, okay, Adam, you can be our well-being researcher. So, Adam, I actually I feel like there's oh my God, Ryan, you're a well-being.
There we go.
We're all it. We're all it. Um, I think there's a role for trying to be method agnostic, right? And not or framework agnostic. Because I think a lot of people come in and they're like, this is my framework, this is my like identity, I think, or affinity can build a lot of barriers in addition to providing a lot of expertise.
Yeah, a lot of the like in sort of the well-being space, at least for like subjective well-being indicators, there are people that have maybe a scale or a set of items they developed, and they're really sold on those. So if we would have brought one of those people on the team, I'm not saying it would have been bad necessarily, but they would have just
Right.
say they would have just said, "Hey, here's my stuff. Just use this." Um, a
Right.
lot potentially, right? So,
Right.
yeah, I've got this life satisfaction scale or these kind of different this well-being index. It's got these different dimensions or something like that. And I don't know, especially because we don't know the extent to which those might actually be connected to energy and or energy use in the household or household level factors. I, I think there's a case that maybe somebody like a world-renowned life satisfaction researcher might not have been, um, you know, a great addition, potentially, unless they were like life satisfaction and HVAC systems somehow together or something. I don't know.
Also, what
Yeah.
they do just isn't that complex. Like, I think like in a lot of ways, like Ellison's review has been way more useful than what that perspective would have been done. And so I think we can clearly make that argument and say, we had to grow this up within our team, but that was part of our goal is to figure out what it really needed to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think also coming at it from the different perspectives, like what's available. But I mean, Kartik, you've done a lot of fusing of those well-being things too, and you've got some framing around that, which I think a lot of this needs to be sorted out. What I found in my attempts to contribute to Ellison's paper is that the that there's no shortage of frameworks. What there is a shortage of is how to use these things appropriately, and like how to know when you've chosen the right one. Anyway, so just wanted to put pin in that for y'all, just so you knew that that was on the agenda. I think we're gonna have to, I think we have a justification for what we've done. But we're gonna have to come out strong about like, hey, this was one of our boundary objects and here's what we did, coming at it from all directions. Okay, well, I don't really have anything else. I just wanted to get ideas for starting the starting the slide deck. I think we can expect this to be pretty scripted, the video. Like we don't want to get into a wandering conversation, so that like that leads off track. And so there'll have to be a couple of iterations. I don't want it to be so scripted that it sounds scripted, right? But some guidance for how long and the kinds of questions I think might be there.
I think we have an expert on that style of it conversation, Chris.
Yeah, one thing that I was sort of imagining is regardless of who I pair up with, but for instance, if Raidul was interviewing me, I think one method that would be sort of interesting would be, you know, for him to more or less lead the question with one thing that I've found in my own research in this particular area is the following. In your interviews with residents about this area, what have you been finding? And I think it will lend itself in various ways to, again, demonstrating how some of our stuff converges. And I think that multiple people could do that.
That's really interesting. So start with, here's what I think I know. What have you found?
Something along those lines.
Yeah, I like that because I feel like Raidul turns up a lot of things that are not that don't show up in your interviews, right?
Sure.
That's a really interesting. Gosh, that could go on for like 10 minutes already. Yeah, great point, Allison. Chris, I'm gonna if you'd be willing to guide how we conduct that, it'd be great.
Sure, I'll help out wherever I can.
That's awesome. Okay, I don't have anything else. Is there other stuff that people have on their minds about this or the video or anything, or cool down from the in-person meeting?
If we had time, I was going to talk with Adam about some data stuff. You were on that email chain too, and Ellison, if you wanted to stick around.
About the noise stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to hear about that. And
Yeah, I was mid-email.
anyone who wants to hear about it didn't look like noise to me. It looked like a signal. So I'm
Yeah,
curious.
no, so see if I can, is there a way, can I share my screen?
Yeah,
Yep.
I can do that.
I don't know,
Go
other
ahead.
people
Okay,
have
so
more
we're
important things to talk
officially
about.
transitioning to a different topic. So if you Ryan, why don't you if not everyone is on the email chain, which I didn't notice, why don't you give a short blurb about what you're going to show so people can decide if they want to stay or not?
Okay, so I've been working with the Denver permit data and trying to understand I was essentially trying to make descriptives, and Ellison and Adam and I had a meeting about like looking for social contagion effects like within like heat pump permits. And so as I started working with that, there's just so much data in there that like there's actually like trends that show up that I haven't seen people talk about in the research a lot. And so that's what I wanted to talk with them about. Is there anything there that's showing up in the results that it's worth writing a paper about. All right, is that an okay blurb? Okay.
You should be able to share.
All right. So this is the main result I wanted to talk about. Okay, so this is very confusing. So I'm going to step back. What are we looking at here? So on the x-axis, it's the week of the year. So this is permits from 2020 to 2023. So 0 would be like the week of January 1st. All the way on the right would be the week of December 31st. It's a cyclic model. So what it's going to assume is that we're going to understand the second week of 2020 is about the same as the second week of 2023. And then it has a random walk order, which means that it's going to say that, hey, the first week of the year is more like the second week of the year than it is like the 40th week of the year. So it's going to smooth over time. What these are they are random effect estimates. So they're essentially, you can think of them like an individual regression coefficient for each week. That's essentially all it is. Okay, on the y-axis is essentially the effect size, and then I put colors in the model depending on what the result we're looking at. So these are scopes of works for mechanical permits. So it's the population is people who got mechanical permits, and then what was the permit about? So I'm going to start with the red line. This is the odds that somebody got a mechanical permit for installing a furnace. So what I see there when I look at this is it's higher in the winter, lower in the summer, then higher again as fall comes. And this reflects like what HVAC contractors have said for years is like, yeah, people replace their furnace in the winter when they need to use it. You don't necessarily replace your furnace in the summer. AC, the opposite trend. So we have people installing more AC or more likely to install an AC in the summer than in the winter. The thing that stood out to me is heat pumps followed the same general trend as an air conditioning unit, which to me is potentially intriguing because we would expect people, they should be installing a heat pump in the winter as well. Or just as likely because like the idea of a heat pump is it does both your heating and your cooling. So part of this could be it's Denver and people aren't using heat pumps for heating. They are seeing them as a cooling technology to save them money in summer. The final result on there is people installing minimum efficiency furnaces. So people are more likely, if they install a furnace, to install a minimum efficiency furnace in the summer. And this is what my noise comment was. So the Kahneman idea of noise is that people's decisions aren't based on what's rational. It's based on other things that influence their judgment. And so part of what I think might be going on here is it's hotter in the summer. I'm more likely to focus on what's going to save me money in terms of cooling than what's most efficient for my house. It's cold in winter. What's going to heat my house and get it to a comfortable temperature? Because I was really cold yesterday in my house, not necessarily like what's most economically efficient. And so I was considering like, is this a result we could run with and say like, hey, we haven't understood these temporal trends in terms of adoption. Everybody's pretty much looked at cross-sectional, do you have a heat pump? Not when did people get a heat pump and like what were their other alternatives? Okay, that's my spiel. That was what I tried to convey in my email. I don't know if it was clear.
So I wonder, my first thought, and this is based upon nothing, I should say. This is not well rooted in the literature or anything else. My first thought is I wonder if the decision to install a heat pump is in some ways a kind of like a categorically different a heat pump or a high efficiency furnace is in some ways a little bit different of a decision than say just replacing your old unit, which I imagine is what a lot of uh, uh, the furnace and air conditioning unit curves are, right? They start to fail and you got to replace them. Okay, we're just going to go do the replacement now. We're going to rush job, get it done. Whereas I wonder if the heat pump or even a high efficiency furnace is a more deliberative, long term kind of more thought out decision. I don't know if there's probably a better word for that, but like that the heat pump exists as a technology, and then you've kind of planned, okay, we're going to get one of these done. Um, Maybe you're a little higher income, a little more expensive home. I don't know if we can figure that out.
Yes and
Whereas
yes.
some of what we're seeing with the red and the blue curves are just like our AC unit's bad. We got to get a new one in. Let's call somebody out here as quickly as we can. They're not even thinking about alternative technologies. I mean, it's probably like maybe roughly comparable to the decision to buy a combustion vehicle versus an EV, you're probably doing lots of research and thinking about a lot of things if you're going to change to an EV from a combustion engine. Whereas if you're going right to just another combustion car, there's like a whole type of decision making that's probably left out. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah.
Or if there's a way to tease that out with our data, if we can, I don't know if there's any kind of, you know, presumably there's not something obvious.
Ryan, do the permits say what they're replacing?
That's a good idea. So I have it for some. It's missing for a lot, but we could try imputing it if you have a good idea based on the data we have there.
I don't know anything about imputing.
I know how to do it. So I mean,
Well,
what would you do if you had those data? That's, I guess, my question.
well, so maybe my question was not well thought out, but maybe my question is, are any of these people actually switching to a heat pump? Because I think it seems that people generally replace. I think Chris has said people generally just put a new thing in of what they have. And so one of the things we'd like to know about is when they decide to do something else. Is that right, Chris? Did I get that right? Like they don't really question should they get another one of the same thing. They're just like, I have a furnace, it broke, I need a furnace. That's my very crude summary of what of your work. So I mean it makes sense to me. I don't know how to do that long thought out thing from these data. Like how long did somebody think about it? But I mean, I would guess that you don't even have a chance to see if you need a new furnace in the summer because you're not using it. It doesn't turn up broken in the summer, right?
Mhm.
But I'm guessing that not all that many people have heat pumps.
It's like 860 in the whole data set, which is like 10,000. So what is that?
So it's
1%.
okay. Okay, so it's like 10%-ish.
No, 1%.
1%?
800 of 10,000. Isn't that 1%?
It's almost 1,000. 800 is almost 1,000, so that's like it's 8%, right?
Oh, maybe I'm bad at math. Okay.
I'm also bad at math, particularly with my current brain.
My
Okay, it's a few
recollection is
percent.
that
It's a small
1%.
number of percent.
My recollection is it's 1%, and so I might be misestimating the top number. Or
Okay.
sorry, the bottom number, the 10 might be wrong. Because I feel like it was 1% of permits were heat
Mm.
pumps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I might like even just for those, see what they had before. Did they have a heat pump and replace it with another heat pump? And not do it for the whole darn data set. Although, if somebody's switching away from a heat pump, I'd be curious about that too, but let's leave that aside.
I guess the other question I would ask the team is, has anybody seen any papers that talk about like these temporal trends in switching at all, rather than just like annual cross section? Because I dug around and I didn't really see anything.
No, but I think I haven't seen anything in like academic literature, but I think I look at this and I'm like, I wonder if a contractor would look at this and be like, well, duh.
Yeah.
like, yes, this is what we've experienced for decades. Like, I wonder if they'd be like, why is this even a result? So I don't know, but
Right, like Of course, we don't replace furnaces in the summer.
Right, right. I mean, I think even just thinking about the billboards that I've seen for Allen in city of Fort Collins, the HVAC provider, like they change their billboards on this frequency. So it's like, I think this is well known, but maybe just not published in academic outlets. So I don't know.
So my question there is, should it be true for heat pumps as well?
I think that's the real question
Mhm.
is, and that's why I'm curious what they're changing from.
Yeah.
So you've got AC in odds. Is that central air?
Yeah, just was it a central AC system? Because window, you don't need a permit.
Okay, okay.
And so like I have like all the housing trends and demographic trends, and like they're pretty much what we would expect, I think. Like this was the one that I didn't necessarily expect.
Which was the trend you didn't expect? I'm sorry, the central heat pump?
Yeah.
Something that Ellison said in just the conversation just made me think that another touch point for HVAC contractors is that there's usually reach out for a spring and a fall tune-up. So that's when, you set up an appointment, they find a problem with the system, even if you don't think that there was a problem with the system, and end up making a decision around spending money to fix the problem or to replace the system. So it might be interesting looking at this like map in Florida or something where like it's only air conditioning replacements. Or
Well,
looking at something like this in a really cold climate where they're not doing like central AC replacements for comparison purposes.
and so Kartik, I don't know how familiar you are with the work that Narasimha just finished, but it seemed like there was the people who are choosing heat pumps, there was a relationship with being able to provide cooling, right?
No, I'm not aware. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we should go back to that because I thought he had some information on that too from a more national scale. So I guess well, okay. What's the difference between a heat pump and an air conditioner? Is
Heat
it just that I mean, isn't it the same? It's got refrigerant, it's got coils outside. And so it's a difference in its ability to operate, right? I feel really stupid right now because there must be a difference, but I don't know what it is.
An AC won't heat your house.
No, no, but it's the same. I mean, it's a very similar physical system in my understanding.
Mhm.
So you just need refrigerant running into the furnace to provide a different temperature, and then outdoors to change the heat. And so like, what's the difference in price, for example? So I'm wondering if people are needing to replace their air conditioner and then they see this opportunity to do it with a heat pump that's pretty much the same thing.
I think you're right. I think that's what's happening. My hunch was based on like what Stacy said of like, if this system was properly functioning in a way that's actively deploying heat pump to the best of their ability, we would expect the bump in summer when people are doing their spring inspection. But because heat pumps heat, it can also potentially replace your furnace. So we would also expect a bump in fall. Whereas we see the exact same trend as AC, and it is a different technology than AC because it also heats your house. And so like, I think you're right. My hunch is people are using heat pumps in Denver to replace ACs. They're not using them to replace their furnaces. And
Yeah, yeah,
to
that's
me,
what
that's an important story to tell in a cold climate place of like, this isn't a complete switch, it's a partial switch. But maybe we need that previous, what did you have before? If we had that, then we might be able to really show that.
Which is a really great question for like implementers. Allison and I started talking about some questions we're thinking about asking implementers, and we're going to meet sometime in June. So this is not ready at all to for us to present here today. But I think like that's a really interesting question, because even if you're not doing a full replacement, intending to use the heat pump heat for the entire winter, like there's going to be a lot of savings in the shoulder seasons, and as it starts getting colder, so like all the way down to 40 degrees, all the way down to 38, 33, 32, depending on the efficiency of the heat pump and how it's rated, there's going to be like huge savings on the gas bill, reducing the amount of gas that's being used. Maybe I'm not saying anything like interesting at all, but I would be looking at that as a homeowner. I'll keep the gas for when it's super cold out, but let me use this as long as I can.
Mhm. Okay, cool. So once again, academics are thrilled by discovering something everybody else knows.
We have to make progress somehow.
Yeah.
All right,
No,
I'm going to dig into
I
the
think-
previous fuel stuff. I think that's really helpful, actually. So,
Cool. Well, thanks for bringing this, Ryan.
thanks.
Okay, well, I'm you'll be hearing from me. I said that before. But this time it really will have to be true. So I'll be seeking your inputs and outputs. Anyone else have anything? Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great weekend, everybody.